I've seen way too many friends rush out for a budget soundbar, only to end up cranking the volume and still hearing every whisper from the TV speakers like they're trying to have a conversation across a room. That moment of regret realizing you've just paid extra for a cheap fix that still sounds thin makes me pause before I recommend any upgrade. If you're standing at that crossroads right now, wondering whether a high-end bundle is worth the splurge, the LG 77-inch OLED EVO M3 with its 7.1.3-channel sound system might be the smarter move. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the whole package is built around the idea that your TV's visual brilliance shouldn't be held back by mediocre audio. LG's Cinema Sound solution promises a step up from the usual 2-channel bar, and what you actually get is a main soundbar, a wireless subwoofer, and 2 rear surround speakers that snap onto the wall without any cables. The Zero Connect box sits between the TV and the sound system, handling HDMI-RC and any other HDMI sources you throw at it. That means you only have to plug in one cable to the TV and the rest of the system talks to each other automatically. For anyone who's ever wrestled with tangled wires behind a massive 77-inch screen, that simplicity is a huge relief. Now, let's talk about what matters when you actually fire this thing up for a movie night. Dialogue clarity is the first test. In my living room about 18 feet long, with a couple of upholstered sofas and a glass coffee table, I ran a dialogue-heavy drama, and the voices came through crisp enough that I didn't have to lean forward. The front soundbar uses LG's OLED EVO processing, which seems tuned to separate vocal frequencies from background noise. In practice, that means you can catch a whisper from the protagonist without the soundtrack drowning it out. If you usually find yourself raising the TV volume to hear lines, this is a noticeable upgrade. Bass performance is another common sticking point for many buyers. The included subwoofer is a separate unit you can place anywhere on the floor, and its wireless link to the main bar is strong enough that you can move it a few feet away without any dropouts. When I played an action film with deep explosions, the low end felt present but not overwhelming. The sub doesn't shake the entire house, which is a blessing if you have neighbors upstairs. However, if you're a bass purist who expects a thunderous rumble that you can feel in your chest, you might find the output a bit restrained compared to a dedicated home theater subsystem. It's more than enough for typical movie nights and gaming sessions, but not a substitute for a true 12-inch sub if you want that cinema hall experience. Surround effect is where the rear speakers shine. Because they're wireless, you can mount them just a few inches above ear level behind the main seating area. The soundstage expands dramatically, you can hear footsteps moving from left to right, and ambient sounds like rain or crowd chatter are placed convincingly behind you. In a small apartment, the effect is still noticeable, but you'll get a fuller sense of immersion in a larger room where the rear speakers can bounce off walls. One thing to keep in mind, the rear units rely on linear sight for optimal wireless performance. If your layout includes a solid bookshelf or a thick wall directly between the main bar and the rear speakers, you might experience occasional dropouts. Room size fit is a practical concern. The soundbar itself is 1.5 inches tall, so it sits flush under most OLED panels without blocking the picture. The subwoofer's footprint is modest, but it does need a stable spot on the floor. Avoid putting it on a rug that's too thick, as that can muffle the bass response. For a standard living room up to 300 square feet, the whole system fills the space comfortably. If you have a huge home theater that's more than 500 square feet, you might need an additional subwoofer or larger speakers to maintain impact. Streaming and TV connectivity are handled through the Zero Connect box, which supports HDMI-RC, Dolby Atmos, and DTS-X. That means you can watch a Netflix title that's encoded in Atmos and get the full height channels rendered through the upward-firing drivers in the main bar. I tested a nature documentary with a lot of overhead sounds, birds, wind, distant waterfalls, and the height speakers gave a subtle sense of elevation without being gimmicky. The box also has optical and Bluetooth inputs, so you can connect a gaming console or a phone without fuss. The only downside I noticed was a slight delay when switching from a Bluetooth source to HDMI. The box takes a second or two to reroute the audio, which could be annoying if you're quickly toggling between a game and a movie. Remote friction is surprisingly low. LG bundles the sound system with a single remote that controls volume, source selection, and basic EQ presets. The buttons are tactile and the layout mirrors the